Are you doing, Prof. Todd? Hello?
Hi, Terry. I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I do have some questions about the last exam.
Okay. Hold on to them. We'll take care of it.
Okay, all right. Because I misspelled a few.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. It's nice to see you in the virtual world. It would be much nicer if we could see each other in person, but at least we are here together. So I hope you're well and that you are healthy and safe and that your families are okay. Okay. Let me just mention a couple of business items here. You know that this Monday, the 4th, you have your second lab exam. The study guide for that was sent out on Monday. So if you didn't receive that, please let me know and I will send it to you. Um, the study guide should prepare you to do well on your lab exam this Monday. Okay. Uh, do you have any questions about the lab exam that's coming up on Monday? Okay, not hearing anything, so let me know if you do have questions. Once again, the lab exam is coming up this Monday, the 4th. Also, you know that final exams are not far away at all. Final exam for your class is now 2 weeks away from today. It is Wednesday, May 13th. Wednesday, May 13th is in fact your final exam. Okay. So, all right, let's talk about first off, if you can hear me okay, please type yes into the chat window. Okay, thank you so much. I don't want to be sitting here talking for 5 minutes and realizing that you can't hear me. Okay, thank you for telling me that. Okay, so the lecture exams are now completed in terms of I finally had a chance to go through everything. Okay, if you do have a question about something, about a way a question was graded or anything, please send me an email privately and I will take a look at that. Okay. Generally speaking, I don't give credit back for answers where you've misspelled terms, but I am making an exception at this moment in time because of the unusual circumstances we are in. So if you had a correct answer that you did not get credit for because of a misspelling, send me an email. I will go back and review that. And if everything looks reasonable, I'll return that credit to you. Okay. Um, so please remember though, folks, that part of your education is being able to not only know the information, but communicate it properly. That means being able to read and write the information correctly. Okay. But by all means, send me an email if you think if you think you should get credit back for a question that the computer marked wrong. Okay, the class average on this exam was a 69%, which it is lower than your second lecture exam class average. And I think, I think what's happening is that folks are getting tired, that everybody's stressed out right now, so it's hard to study when it's hard to force yourself to study. So there's a number of things going on at this time. What I'm going to do is bring the essay portion of the exam up and just discuss a few things with you that were commonly missed. Okay, so let me do that. I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay. All right. And so let me bring up the chat window here. So that you can communicate with me as we're going over this. Okay, so on your screen at this time, you should see the class marker website. All right, and you should see the essay questions that were talked about. Okay. So question one, most of you handled just well. What is a stem cell? A stem cell is an unspecialized cell. It's kind of like a blank cell whose destiny has not yet been determined. Number two, what is the difference between an adult-derived stem cell and an embryonic stem cell? Well, practically speaking, the difference is in their potential. Embryonic stem cells can literally become any cell that the body needs, whereas adult-derived stem cells are more tissue and organ specific. For example, we all have stem cells in our skin, and those stem cells in our skin can be a variety of cells that the skin needs, but they can't be liver cells and they can't be heart cells. Number three, what does the term undifferentiated mean? It means unspecialized and unrestricted. Its destiny is not yet set. Okay, its potential is not yet set. Do you have any questions about the first essay, question number one here? Please feel free to unmute your microphone or type into the chat window. Okay, I guess everybody's okay with that. Let's go on to question two. For question two, this was the blood types. And for here, the first 8 questions, you had to provide the necessary information in each slot of this table. For example, if you have a B antigen on the surface of the red blood cell, that means you have type B blood. So slot 1 answer is B blood. In slot 2, you have an anti-A antibody in that plasma. Okay? If you have anti-A and anti-B antibodies in the plasma, that means you are type O blood. So the answer for slot 3 is type O. And slot 4, you have no surface antigens for the blood types. For the third row of the table here, where we have blood type A, the antigen on the surface is going to be A and the antibody is going to be anti-B. For slot 7, if I have A and B antigens, that means I'm blood type AB, and I have no anti-A or anti-B antibodies in the plasma. Okay, so that's what you needed to do to fill in the table. Question 9 here within the second essay question. Most of you told me that type O is the universal donor, but some of you stumbled on explaining why it's the universal donor. It is the universal donor because the red blood cells contain no surface antigens. That's why it is considered the universal donor. And as we discussed in class, as long as you separate the red blood cells from the plasma, then you can truly donate the red blood cells of type O, and they will not cause an agglutination problem in the recipient's body. For the question 10 within essay 2, I discussed the fact that the recipient's blood is more troublesome than the donor's blood. Folks, this is a hard question, and I did not expect you to get it, and many of you did not get it. A few of you did dance around it pretty well, and I gave partial credit for it. But the problem here that I'm addressing is that the recipient's blood is more likely to cause a problem simply because the recipient's blood volume is greater than that of the donated blood, right? Because the recipient's blood has more blood volume, there are more antibodies in it to potentially cross-react to antigens on the surface of the donated red blood cells. Okay, so that was a little bit of a hard question, but we are in school to challenge you from time to time. So do you have any questions about essay number 2? Okay, not hearing anything. I will continue. For the third question here, the third essay question, you had this blood flow chart, and I think this did flummox some of you, okay? Remember in your notes before, well, actually, I don't know if it was before we left on break or with us here online, it seems like a lifetime ago, I had that drawing with the Valentine's Day heart and the lungs and the abdomen. And that's what this essay was all about. So for each row here, you had to fill in the correct information. If you have blood that's beginning its journey at the heart and moving towards the lungs, then that means for slot 1, you are in the pulmonary circuit. The type of blood carrying that blood is going to be an artery, because arteries are always used to move blood away from the heart. The blood in that artery is going to be oxygen poor. The reason it's oxygen poor is because it's just returning from the systemic circulation, so we need to move that blood to the lungs to pick up fresh oxygen. So that blood is going to be oxygen poor, and that blood at slot 4 is going to be CO2 rich. And so you just continue from row to row. If the blood is in the lungs going back to the heart, that's the pulmonary circuit. Blood goes back to the heart through a vein, so slot 6 is vein. Slot 7, the blood is oxygen rich because we just picked up fresh oxygen at the lungs. And in slot 8, the blood is carbon dioxide poor because we just exhaled CO2 out of the body. We continue here with the third row. If we're in the heart and we go to body tissue like the abdomen or the brain or anything like that, then the circuit is going to be the systemic circuit for slot 9. The blood vessel is artery. The blood is oxygen rich for slot 11. The blood is CO2 poor for slot 12. At the body tissue, there's going to be an exchange of gases before the blood begins its journey back to the heart. So as the blood moves back to the heart, the circuit is systemic. The type of blood vessel is a vein because the blood's moving towards the heart. The blood is oxygen poor because we've released oxygen into the tissue. And the blood is CO2 rich because we've picked up carbon dioxide waste products from our tissue. Okay, so it's not a hard question, but I think maybe the chart threw some of you off. Okay, do you have any questions about the chart at this time? Okay. All right, and then number 17 here is part of the third essay. Explain how blood is moved through the veins. Well, the best thing you could have said for that is to mention that skeletal muscle contraction is responsible for pushing blood towards the heart. There are other aspects of this, such as the presence of one-way valves in the veins and the influence of gravity above the heart and the pressure changes inside the chest cavity associated with breathing. All of these things influence the motion of blood through the veins, but it is definitely not caused by heart contraction. Heart contraction moves blood into the arteries. It doesn't do anything for the veins. Okay, on to question 4. Question 4 was a challenge question for you. I tell you that HIV kills helper T cells. I want you to explain why people with HIV are in danger from normally things that are not threatening to them. Folks, the reason they're in danger is because the helper T cells are needed to activate the immune system. So if you're killing them, you can't turn your immune system on. So to get credit for question 4, you had to have language that indicated that helper T cells are involved in turning the immune system on. Okay. For question 5, the 3 functions of the complement system. Well, we said this quickly in class. Complement system enhances phagocytosis. It stimulates inflammation, and it can act as a bridge for defense cells to grab onto the pathogen. Most of you did just fine with question 5. For question 6, Ira got bit by a tick. He goes to the doctor right away, and the doctor refuses to test him for Lyme disease. Lyme disease is a disease that's transmitted by a bacterium that's carried in the tick. So the tick is the vector, but the cause is actually a bacterial cell that's in the tick. And that bacterium is called Borrelia burgdorferi. Don't worry about it, but that's what it's called. At any rate, if you get bitten with a tick, let's say you're out walking in the woods and you get home and you're changing your clothes and you notice a tick bite, if you go to the doctor right away, they're not going to test you because there has not been sufficient time for your immune system to potentially mount a response to anything in the body. So you need to wait several weeks after the tick bite before a blood test is going to show you anything.
So I did say something about that question. I talked about how, and this is just with my previous encounter with doctors. Usually, though, if it was within 48 hours, though, you don't need to be tested for it. Is that something I get a point for? Or?
Terry, you'll have to send me that through email, because right now
Okay.
we're in the public
Right.
domain, so everything you say, everybody else can hear. Okay.
Oh,
Um,
shoot. Okay.
but certainly send me your concern, and we can talk about that. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Sorry.
Any other questions? Okay. Yeah. So if you have a specific concern, please send me emails, and I will get back to you. For question 7, the mechanical process of bringing air into the lungs. Most of you described inhalation, but then you didn't bother to describe exhalation. Okay, I wanted to see a complete response to this question, and many of you gave me a 50% response. Okay, so as we said in class, when your diaphragm contracts, it goes down, which makes the volume of space in the chest cavity larger, so the air pressure drops, so air can enter the body. When the diaphragm relaxes, it pushes back up into the chest cavity, which shrinks the volume of space in the chest cavity, which elevates the air pressure, allowing you to push air out of the body. So you needed to have both sides of that conversation to get full credit. And then question 8 had a number of questions here. Question 1, how does a macrophage know that a pathogen is foreign? Well, it checks for the presence of MHC. Those are the self-identifying markers that the immune system cell needs to look for. Question 2, why does a macrophage place pieces of pathogen outside the membrane? It's trying to attract the attention of the correct helper T cell with the correct receptor to activate the immune system. Number 3, why is it reasonable to expect that a helper T cell will have a receptor capable of binding an antigen? Well, it's reasonable to expect that, gang, because as I alluded to in lecture, your immune system is manufacturing a whole army of different helper T cells with randomly shaped receptors before you're ever infected. So there's a very good possibility that in that army of different T cells with different shaped receptors, there's going to be one that has the right receptor of the right shape to bind to something that has entered the body for the very first time. Question number 4, what is the purpose of clonal selection? It is to identify the defense cells that have the right receptor to attack the pathogen, to identify and attack the pathogen, and then to use that cell as a clone to make many copies, so you can build a clone army of identical cells that have the same receptor, so that you have many cells that can attack the pathogen and destroy it. Number 5, what is the name of the specialized B cells that manufacture antibodies? Well, those are plasma cells. Okay, the correct answer is plasma cell. If you told me B lymphocyte, you got half credit for that, because there are other kinds of B lymphocytes. All right. Folks, do you have any general comments or questions that you'd like to ask at this time? Okay. Again, if you have concerns, seriously, I want to encourage you, please send me an email. I will take a look at everything, okay? We'll take a look and respond to you. So, okay. So, class average was 69%, but there were A's and B's on this exam as well. So, some folks did very, very well. So, take heart in that and stay focused, because you have 2 exams coming here at the end of the semester, which can significantly impact your final grade in the course. So you want to stay as focused as you possibly can. Okay. So any questions about the course about our schedule, anything you'd like to ask before we start new content. Okay,
Uh,
go ahead.
no. I just remember. I'll send an email.
Okay, Terry. Folks, remember, counting today, I have 3 lectures with you left. There are 4 chapters on the final exam, chapters 15, 16, 17, and 18. I'm going to do my best to cover chapter 15 today, do my best to cover chapter 16 on Monday, and then because chapter 17 and 18 are kind of like 2 sides of the same coin, I'm going to cover some basic ideas from both 17 and 18 in Wednesday's lecture next week. And then that will be it. I mean, that's how close to the end we really are here. So stay focused, be ready to do some reading and studying on your own time. You really do have to do that. All right, let's continue here. So I'm going to go back to the shared screen and once again bring up, I hope, chat window. And let's go to the Word document, and here we're going to talk about the digestive system. Digestive system is a pretty cool system to study. I wish I had more time with you. We could really go into some neat things, but I think the best I can do with you with the time I have is kind of take you on a tour of your digestive system. So imagine for a moment that, you know, this is some kind of weird tour at an amusement park where I'm going to take you through a tour of the human digestive system. That's what we're going to do at this time. Take a tour of the digestive system. Okay. And so I'm going to start a flow chart up at the top of the document, which is a flow chart that tells you the path that food takes as it enters and passes through the body. Flow chart of the path that food takes through the body. That's what we're going to do. And so I'll start this flow chart, and I will keep coming back to it as we go from one section of the body to the next section of the body. So obviously everything starts in the mouth, right? That's where digestion is actually going to start. So again, I'm going to come back to this flow chart multiple times, but let's talk about the mouth. All right. So if we talk about the mouth, what we can first off is talk about the functions of the mouth. Okay. And I will be sending you this document. So if I'm moving a little too fast for you to write everything, do your best to keep up. But you will get this document from me because I just have a lot to try to get across today. Okay, so the first function of the mouth is to participate in mechanical digestion of the food. By that, I mean when you physically break the food apart in your mouth. Okay. In addition to the mechanical digestion of the food, there is a small amount of chemical digestion of the food. I mean, if you've ever put a piece of food in your mouth without actually chewing and just let it sit there. I mean, the typical example we give you is a cracker, like a saltine cracker. If you've ever put that in your mouth and you don't chew it up with your teeth, you notice it still starts to get very soggy and mushy and starts to break down. That's chemical digestion that's working there. So limited chemical digestion of food. And the food mixes with molecules in the saliva of your mouth. Okay. We also have the quality of the food being monitored. So food quality is monitored. Okay. Have you ever had an experience where you put something, you put a piece of food in your mouth and you just spit it out right away? Okay. It was almost a reflex. Okay. There was something about the food that your body said, I don't really want this. And you just kind of spit it out. So we do monitor the quality of our food in terms of whether it's spoiled or rotten in the mouth. And that typically involves sensory apparatus that's on the surface of the tongue. Okay. So we spit out spoiled food. Okay. Food is moistened. Okay, because it's mixed with the saliva. And then the food is actually positioned. Food is positioned in the proper location by the motion of your tongue so that you can swallow it safely, so we don't choke on things. Food is positioned for swallowing. Okay. All right. So please feel free to ask questions along our tour here. That's quite okay, and I want to encourage you to do that. Okay. So question coming through the chat window. What is the hardest substance in the human body? If you know the answer to that, feel free to type that into the chat window. What's the hardest substance in the human body? Okay. Okay, so we're getting some answers here of bone, and Abigail suggests the possibility of teeth, and that's sort of what I'm hinting at this time. It's actually the enamel of your teeth. The enamel of your teeth is the hardest substance. Okay, and so you can see the enamel on page 289 of your textbook, figure 15.3. All right. All right, so let me talk just a little bit about the teeth. Okay. And I'm just going to put it here underneath function, underneath, well, let's see here. I'll put it as B. Let's put it as B since we are underneath the heading of mouth up here. Let's put down some information about the teeth. Okay. You know there are four primary groups of teeth. They are color-coded for you in picture A of figure 15.3 on page 289. Okay, there are four primary groups of teeth in your mouth. Okay, and it's these groups of teeth that are responsible for physically breaking down the food that you're eating. Okay, these groups are called incisors, which are the teeth at the front of your mouth. You know, if your teeth are in straight and they're not crooked or anything, which is a different issue, then the incisors are going to be fairly vertical. They're going to be straight up and down. So these are located at the front of your mouth. Okay, and they are designed to slice through food. We have the canines, which are sort of the sharp, pointy teeth. Okay, that get accentuated in all our Halloween and horror movies with the vampires and werewolves and things like this. These are the canines. The canines, their function is to puncture and tear at the food. Okay, based on their shape, they're very good at puncturing food and tearing it. And then we have the premolars, which are along towards the side, and the molars themselves, okay, which you can see where they're positioned at the back of your jaw, at the back of the mouth, okay. Both the premolars and the molars are designed to pulverize and crush food. Okay. All right, so a little bit of trivia here, okay. Let me see here. I'm going to type a question into the chat window for you, and this is just a little bit of trivia. What is the connection? Let's put it this way. What is the name of a real human disease that connects vampire folklore with your canine teeth? What is the name of a real human disease that connects vampire folklore with your canine teeth? Anybody know? Vampirism. Well, no. I mean, it's a nice guess. Okay, the name of the disease starts with the letter P. Starts with the letter P. Okay, Carlos, I see your question about the wisdom teeth. Are they basically just extra teeth? Well, they are teeth that often don't fit properly in your jaw, and so they are evolutionary remnants from our ancestors. So if they don't come in properly, then yeah, we do want to get rid of them, because having them crammed in there can actually damage your jaw and actually damage the other teeth. For some folks, it's not an issue. I still have my wisdom teeth, although over the years I've had some pain with them. But for others, they have a lot of problem with it. Okay, so the answer to this question is a disease called porphyria. A disease called porphyria. Let me tell you a little bit about porphyria. Porphyria is a human blood disorder that is associated with your body's inability to manufacture heme for the bloodstream. Porphyria is a human blood disorder that is associated with a deficit in the body's ability to manufacture the heme of hemoglobin. Okay, this is a real disease. Okay, and some of the symptoms of this disease, I think you're going to recognize. Okay, some of the symptoms of the disease include sensitivity to light. Okay. All right, so hopefully right there you see sensitivity to light. Well, in our old vampire movies and things like this, it's often the case that, right, the vampires walk around at night because they're afraid of sunlight. So, but real people with porphyria are actually sensitive to light. Additionally to this, the gum line, okay, the gum line in your teeth, for folks that have porphyria, for reasons that are not completely understood, their gum line actually recedes higher up into their jaw. So like the gum line on the top of your jaw, it moves up towards your nose. It pushes up. And the result of that is that your teeth are not any longer than they would otherwise be, but because the gums have receded higher, it artificially makes the teeth look longer, particularly the canines. So the gum line recedes I'm not sure how to spell recedes, into the gum line. Okay, this makes canine teeth look longer. Okay, and so there are some other, so obviously the sensitivity to the light and the canine teeth making them look longer kind of connect in with the vampire folklore. There are some other known symptoms of the disease, such as neuropathy. Okay, there's a lot of pain in the body because caused by damaged nerve endings. Okay, damaged nerve endings cause neuropathic pain. And sometimes folks with this disease often experience an increase in skin lesions. Okay, their skin rips open, they're more susceptible to bacterial infections on the surface of the skin. Okay. There is no cure for this disease, but modern medicine is able to successfully treat it and keep the worst parts of the symptoms at bay. So, if you are someone that has this, not all is lost. It can be successfully treated. Okay. All right, gang. So there you go. A little bit of trivia about your teeth and vampire folklore. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. So let's see. Let's ask another question. What causes you to have cavities? What do you think, folks? What causes you to have cavities? What is a cavity? Why do we get cavities? Okay. Well, to move things along here, folks, cavities are actually areas of the enamel that have broken down. And so typically the enamel, which is the hardest substance in the human body, is still susceptible to breakdown by things in the body that are acidic. So if you drink a lot of acidic liquids, coffee all the time, or Coca-Colas that have acid in them, that's very hard on the surface of the enamel. In addition to that, all of you know that we have bacteria and a variety of microorganisms that actually live in our mouth. And every time we put food in our mouth, we're actually feeding these microorganisms. So when the microorganisms eat some of the food that we put in our own bodies, in our mouth, they eat this material, and one of the things they release is an acid. They release an acid, and that acid actually slowly breaks down the enamel, and all of a sudden we have a cavity. Okay, so cavities are caused by the acidic erosion of the enamel, typically caused by microbes in the mouth and the consumption of acidic foods and drinks. Okay. All right, gang. Please let me know if you have questions. So we're continuing with the mouth discussion. We mentioned teeth, but also we have to talk about the salivary glands. Okay. So salivary glands are highlighted at the bottom right corner of page 289. Okay. We have 3 pairs of salivary glands. Okay, they are known as the parotid, the sublingual, and the submandibular glands. All right. Each pair of salivary glands manufactures a unique substance. So the secretion from a parotid gland is not saliva. The secretion from a sublingual gland is not saliva. The secretion from a submandibular gland is not saliva. It's only the mixture of the three secretions from the three different types of glands that together is what we mean as saliva. So the mixture of secretions from the three pairs of glands forms saliva. Now, one of the talking points that I want to bring up is that saliva contains a special enzyme called salivary amylase, which is responsible for the initial chemical digestion of carbohydrates in the body, specifically starch. Okay, saliva contains a special enzyme called salivary amylase, which is responsible for the initial chemical breakdown of starch. All right. So that's why when you put, that's why when you put a cracker or some other similar material in your mouth, it does start to get mushy. All right. Okay, gang, I want to speed right along here because we got to do our best to cover this entire chapter today. Please feel free to ask questions. I'll do my best not to ignore them. So please ask questions. So we've covered the salivary glands. We've covered the teeth. The last thing in the mouth we've got to talk about is your tongue. Okay. So let's see here. D is the tongue. Okay, you know that the tongue is a skeletal muscle, right? And you know that because you can consciously move it, right? If you wanted to, your brain could order your tongue to touch the roof of your mouth and it would obey. Okay, so the tongue is a skeletal muscle. It's under conscious control. Okay. On the surface of the tongue, you have different taste buds, which we talked about in chapter 9, right? We talked about taste buds in chapter 9, which allow you to perceive a variety of flavor sensations from your food. Things such as whether the food is bitter, whether it's sour, whether it's salty, whether it's sweet. Okay, these sorts of sensations we can perceive because of the different variety of taste buds that are on the surface of your tongue. Okay, as we mentioned earlier, the tongue is responsible for positioning the food properly for swallowing. Okay. And so, I mean, we've all had the experience in life where, we maybe swallowed at the wrong moment in time and we kind of choked a little bit on our own food or drink. That could have been because the food was not exactly positioned correctly at that moment in time. And maybe the tongue didn't quite finish its work before you decided to swallow. Okay. Now it's here that I'm going to introduce a new term to you. Okay. And that term is bolus. Bolus refers to the food in your mouth that has been physically and chemically broken down as it is mixed with the saliva. So in other words, by the time you are ready to swallow that material, you don't technically have food in your mouth anymore. You have bolus in your mouth. Okay. Bolus is what food is turned into in the mouth as it is physically broken down by teeth and chemically softened by the saliva. Okay? When you swallow, you are swallowing bolus, not food. It's kind of a disgusting way of thinking about it, but you know, in the realm of science, we have different words that mean different things. Okay, so as you chew your food and break it down into a goo, that goo is called bolus. And the bolus is what you're actually swallowing. Okay, thoughts, questions? All right, let's continue. Okay, so let's talk about our flow chart up here. Okay, so we've talked about the mouth quite a lot. So the next thing you do is swallow that bolus, right? And that bolus passes into the pharynx. Passes into the pharynx. You can see the pharynx on page 290. You can see the pharynx on page 288. You know, there's not much to be said about the pharynx other than it's simply a passageway for food and air to enter your body. That's all it really is. Okay, so I'll just note that down here. Number two, number one here, try to keep these numbers consistent with the flow chart. Number two is the pharynx. Okay, this is the hollow tube that bolus enters after you swallow. Okay, there's not much that goes on there. It's simply a conduit, a tube, a passageway to allow the material to move deeper into the body. Okay, all right. So at this point, the bolus, which is in your pharynx, is going to continue down deeper into the body. It's going to approach the larynx, but because the larynx is going to remain closed, because it's food that's moving, that bolus is going to be siphoned off into the esophagus. So the bolus goes from the pharynx into the esophagus. So number three here in our flow chart is the esophagus. Okay. And once again, you can see the esophagus on 388, 290, page 288, page 290, even page 291 has some things that we could talk about. So number three, the esophagus, okay? This is a long hollow tube which connects the pharynx to your stomach. Long hollow tube that connects the pharynx to the stomach. All right. Now, there are a couple talking points about this that I want to make. Okay. Like most tubing in your body, there is a layer of smooth muscle tissue that goes around the circumference of the tube. And the smooth muscle tissue actually contracts in a rhythmic way to push bolus down into your stomach. That's what's being shown to you in figure 15.6. So the esophagus, the tubing of the esophagus contains smooth muscle tissue that contracts in a coordinated fashion to push bolus down into the stomach. Okay, so you take a bite of cheeseburger, you chew it up with your teeth, you mix it with your saliva, it becomes bolus. You swallow that bolus into the pharynx. That material goes deeper into the pharynx, and because the larynx is closed, it pushes right off into the esophagus. So we go from the pharynx to the esophagus. The esophagus takes that material, that bolus, and it begins to contract above the bolus to pinch the bolus downward into the stomach. Okay, so I will highlight figure 15.6 in your notes. Question coming into the chat window. What is it called? Let me ask you this. What is happening to you when you experience reverse peristalsis? So gang, the coordinated contraction of the smooth muscle tissue to move the bolus down into the stomach is known as peristalsis. So what's happening to you if you're experiencing reverse peristalsis? Okay, that's exactly right, Carlos. You're vomiting. Okay, when you are vomiting, you are experiencing the supreme joy of reverse peristalsis. That's exactly right. Okay, let's get that vocab word into your notes here. Peristalsis refers to the coordinated contraction of the smooth muscle tissue to push bolus down, okay, down into the stomach. All right, so unfortunately, I'm sure most of us at some moment in time have experienced that reverse peristalsis business. Not too fun for anybody. Okay. All right, the esophagus is also the location of where most people will experience at some moment in time, they will experience some form of heartburn. Heartburn is not literally burning of the heart, but what it is a chemical burning of the esophageal tissue when stomach acid leaves the stomach and inappropriately enters the esophagus. Okay? When stomach acid accidentally leaves the stomach and enters the esophagus, we experience heartburn. Okay? If you have ever experienced heartburn in your life, please type yes into the chat window. Wow, I guess you young folks don't experience it. Okay, okay, all right. Folks, you know, the occasional heartburn can be expected. It's just a fact of living life. But the reality of it is, if you're having a heartburn frequently, like several times a week, or God forbid, every day, that is abnormal, and you need to get to a doctor and talk about that. Now, heartburn can be caused because you have a poor diet. It can be caused because you're eating the wrong foods. It can be caused because you're eating too much food. Okay, so if you do have persistent heartburn, please go see a doctor, because if you continually agitate the esophageal tissue with the acid from the stomach, you are at a statistically higher probability of developing esophageal cancer, and that's extremely serious. So, the occasional heartburn every once in a while, no big deal. But if you find yourself experiencing it frequently, you really need to talk to a doctor about that. And I say that because a few years ago, I was experiencing heartburn regularly, and it was a real problem. And after some conversations with my doctor and doing some of my own research, I realized that the thing that was giving me heartburn was drinking whole milk. Whole milk contains too much fat in it for us old folks, and my body couldn't handle it anymore. So I had to stop drinking whole milk. So all those delicious milkshakes and things that I love to have in the summertime, well, I have to only enjoy them every once in a great while. Otherwise, I have trouble with it. Okay? So just be aware of it, that the occasional heartburn's okay, but frequent heartburn is abnormal. Any questions? Okay, let's talk about the next part of your anatomy, which is going to be the stomach. Here we are in our flow chart. Number 4 is the stomach. Okay, so the food enters the mouth, it's converted into bolus. The bolus is swallowed into the pharynx, which is then moved into the esophagus. The esophagus uses muscle contraction to move the bolus into the stomach. So number 4. Okay, number 4 is the stomach. All right, a couple things I want to say here. The first thing I want to point out is that the stomach is not the primary location of nutrient absorption. Okay, many people think that it is because they just, you just think about your belly, think about your stomach, that's where the food goes. That must be where the nutrients of the food are absorbed. That is not true. Okay, the stomach is not the primary location of nutrient absorption. That location is below the stomach in an area called the small intestine, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Okay, so the stomach is shown to you on figure 15.7, page 291. And let me talk about the primary functions of the stomach. One of the primary functions of the stomach is simply to store the bolus. Okay, I'm going to use the word food here because we're used to that, but technically it's bolus. So storage of bolus. Okay. In other words, you can eat a meal, and your stomach can hold that meal, can hold the contents of that meal for a period of time, giving your body time to process it. Your body doesn't have to immediately process it because it can stay in this soft pouch, the soft sac that we call the stomach. The stomach is capable of stretching to store several liters of food in the typical adult. Okay, obviously some people have a bigger stomach than others, and we all know the guy that's been walking around with the big beer gut. He's really extended belly because he's been stretching out his stomach way too long, drinking too much beer. Okay, but the stomach can store that material, the food and drink, till it can be more appropriately processed. In fact, your brain becomes aware of when your stomach is full by the fact that the stomach tissue, the lining of the stomach itself, actually stretches. And when it stretches, it activates electrical signals. Nerve endings embedded in the fabric of the stomach send an action potential up to the brain, and the brain says, oh, the stomach is full. And so that gives you the psychological awareness that you are full and that you don't need or want to eat any more food. Your brain becomes aware of when you are full, because when the stomach stretches, it sends an electrical signal to the brain. Okay? So you might imagine in some folks that have eating disorders where they eat and eat, and they kind of overeat all the time, one of the reasons can be because something's wrong with that electrical signal. It's not getting sent to the brain properly, or it's not being interpreted by the brain properly. Okay, so one of the functions of the stomach is to store the food. And I misspelled storage. It's simply S-T-O-R-A-G-E. Okay. Second function of the stomach is something called liquefaction. Okay. Liquefaction refers to a slow churning of the stomach contents. Okay, imagine, let me see. Have you ever gone to one of those restaurants with the rotisserie chicken where the restaurant has been slow roasting the chicken for a long time on a rotisserie, right? That makes the meat very tender, very soft, very moist, very juicy. Okay, it is the slow roasting, it is the slow churning of the content of the food, of the bolus in the stomach, that gives that material time to be broken down by the stomach acid. Okay, so liquefaction refers to the slow roasting of stomach content by contraction of smooth muscle tissue in the walls of the stomach. Okay, this gives your body a chance to mix the bolus with stomach juices to continue to digest the bolus material. Okay. All right, so the notes that I have on this is that turning over of content in the stomach in the average person lasts anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. So let's say you've had a pretty substantial meal for Thanksgiving or Easter or Christmas. Typically the food that you put in your stomach is going to stay in the stomach and be turned around and massaged a little bit, on average between 3 to 5 hours before it continues through the digestive system. Okay. Liquefaction typically lasts 3 to 5 hours. Some folks it's shorter, some folks it's longer, but on average 3 to 5 hours is typical. Okay. So let's see here. Here we got to put in another term. Okay. When you take the bolus and you put it into the stomach and you mix the bolus with the digestive juices of the stomach, we change the name of the material again. It's no longer bolus. It's now going to be called chyme, just to make things more complicated for your last exam. How about that? Okay, so chyme. This refers to bolus that is mixed with stomach juices during liquefaction. Okay, chyme. This refers to bolus that is mixed with stomach juices during liquefaction. So all kinds of nice vocab words for that last exam of the semester. Okay, there's a third function of the stomach. The third function of the stomach is to begin the process of breaking down protein. So the initial chemical digestion of protein occurs in the stomach. Okay. Now, it's here where I will talk about your digestive juices, your stomach juices. Okay, so a question could be posed: what is stomach juice made of? And there's two things that you really need to appreciate. The first of, well, obviously it's made of a bunch of water, because everything in the body is water. But in addition to the water, there's also a lot of hydrochloric acid in there, okay? Now, I won't I won't make you do it because of our time together, but hydrochloric acid is a very corrosive acid. It has a pH between 2 and 3. It's extremely corrosive. Okay, so this is a very powerful acid. Okay, and so it should not be a surprise to you that if some of that acid shoots up into the esophagus where it's not supposed to be, it really is going to chemically burn the lining of the esophagus. Okay, so stomach juice is made of water, hydrochloric acid, and for our purposes, something that I would like you to appreciate, an enzyme called pepsin. Okay, it's the pepsin enzyme that's actually responsible for the initial breakdown of protein. Pepsin is responsible for the initial chemical breakdown of protein. All right. Okay, gang. Any questions so far? All right. So I have a question for you. If the stomach juice contains a powerful acid, how does the stomach avoid being damaged by this acid? Right? If you have this powerful acid in the stomach juice, how does your stomach avoid destroying itself? What do you think? Okay, I hope you're not passed out on the floor at home, right? This is some meaty content we're going over right now. Let me give you a, I'm looking at the clock here and I'm very aware of how much time I have left with you. Folks, let me give you the answers on this. Probably the most important thing we can say is that your stomach, okay, Carlos, thank you for that statement about the mucus. That is certainly part of the answer here. That is definitely part of the answer here. Okay, the lining of the stomach can produce a neutralizing mucus to control the acidity. That is certainly true. That's a nice comment. In addition to that, the reality is your stomach lining is being damaged by the hydrochloric acid. You have many cells that are dying at this very moment of time as you sit here taking this class online. But we typically don't feel it in the healthy body because the stomach is able to replace those damaged cells very rapidly. So as cells are dying, new cells are being manufactured to replace them. And in fact, the stomach has one of the highest rates of cell reproduction in your entire body. In the next 60 seconds, the next 1 minute, your stomach is going to manufacture brand new 500,000 new cells. Okay? So the stomach is constantly manufacturing new cells to replace cells that are destroyed by acid at a rate of 500,000 new cells per minute. I mean, that's kind of insane if you think about it. Okay, your body has been intentionally built so that cells can die, but that can be counterbalanced by cells being created. All right. Two other things to think of is that the production of the acid is not constant. The stomach can turn the acid production on and off. And finally, even when there is acid in the belly, in the stomach, if you put food or drink into that environment, isn't that going to make the volume of that environment larger, which means you're going to dilute the acid. So when you eat food and drink, you momentarily dilute the acid. Okay, so all of these factors play a role in ensuring that your stomach isn't destroyed by the acid. Okay. Now, if I had more time with you, I'd go into more things because this is a fascinating issue, but I don't think I have time. I simply will highlight peptic ulcers that you see on page 297 of the textbook. Okay, so people sometimes do damage the lining of the stomach or the small intestine, and you get these ulcers, right? If you're on page 297, when you get an ulcer in the stomach, it's called a gastric ulcer. It's an opening, a hole, a perforation in the lining of the stomach. Okay, that can be promoted by the over excess production of stomach acid, which correlates with the presence sometimes of bacterial infections like the bacterium Helicobacter pylori, which your book is talking about. And the same thing, you can get perforations of the small intestine in an area called the duodenum, so you get a duodenal ulcer. Okay, folks, long story short, you do not want a gastric ulcer. They are extremely painful. Okay, so you will know it if you have one, and you will not be a happy camper. And if you have one, you will need emergency abdominal surgery to sew up that hole. Okay, so let's try to avoid that if at all possible. Thoughts, questions? Okay, all right, let's go on, gang, in our flow chart. Okay, so we're down at the stomach. So we're going to liquefact that chyme for about 3 to 5 hours. And then that chyme is going to enter the small intestine. So number 5 in our notes is small intestine. And the first thing I'll say here is that the small intestine is the primary site of nutrient absorption from your food. So you see the initial chemical breakdown of food begins in the mouth, and much more of it occurs during liquefaction in the stomach, and then even more of it occurs in the small intestine. So there's several stages of chemical digestion that occur at different anatomical locations of your body until we get this chyme material ready for absorption into the bloodstream. So the small intestine is the primary site of nutrient absorption from your food. And maybe I should modify that. It's the primary site of chemical digestion and nutrient absorption from your food. Okay, that's the small intestine. Now, the small intestine is called small not because its length is small, but because the diameter of the tubing is small. Okay, so let's see here. Some other things that I'd like to point out to you, and I guess it's looking like I'm not going to quite get this chapter done, but I'll do my best. Okay. Most of the chemical digestion that takes place in the small intestine is only possible because of enzymes that are made in the pancreas. Okay, let's say that again. Most of the enzymes responsible for the chemical digestion of your food in the small intestine are actually made in the pancreas. Okay, very important to appreciate that. So at this moment, with just a simple statement like that, you should be able to appreciate that if you get pancreatic cancer, that's a really bad thing. I mean, not only is it bad because it's a cancer, but if you have cancer of the pancreas, then your pancreas is not producing the enzymes properly that you need to absorb nutrients from the food so that your immune system has the energy to actually fight the cancer. It's kind of a double whammy. Pancreatic cancer is really, really bad. Okay. All right. So most of those enzymes for chemical digestion are actually made in the pancreas, and then they are secreted into the small intestine where they do their work. Okay. All right, folks. It's 1:45, so yeah, I can't finish this today. So here's our game plan moving forward. I'm going to finish this conversation in about 10 to 15 minutes on Monday. I will zoom through the urinary system on Monday. And then I will give you some coverage of chapters 17 and 18 next Wednesday to help you get ready for your final exam. Do you have any questions at this time about what we talked about this afternoon? Okay, thank you, Aileen. I appreciate the feedback. Folks, let me remind you, if you do have concerns about your exam, please send me an email. I will take them and review them and get back to you, okay? You have that, you certainly have that right to ask questions. So please send me emails if you have questions. Otherwise, I will send you an email later this afternoon with the video, with the notes, some reminder information, and I will see you on Monday. So until then, please be safe and take care of yourself and your families. So I will see you later.